Hello, hope everyone's doing great. Today we're going to be talking about the pathways to producing ATP within the human body, as for this course for exercise physiology as a part of the Cap 1 assignment. So, what is ATP? ATP is short for adenosine triphosphate, which actually serves for energy use as well as storage within the cellular level. The anatomy, of course, is displayed within a single ATP that's actually comprised of adenine, ribose sugar, as well as 3 phosphate groups that are serially bonded within the singular cell chain. So, particularly, ATP plays a significant role within the mitochondria within our cells. If you call back to the high school days where teachers often say mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, there's a specific reason on why why this is, and which will be further discussed within the lecture. So we do know that there are 3 different energy pathways within the cell. The energy pathways actually involve anaerobic, which had to do with like non-oxygenated use, as well as aerobic, which is oxygenated. So, with the consumption of foods such as proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, the energy can be broken down into 3 systems that comprise of PCR, which stands for phosphocreatine, that makes ATP when the body is exercising at a pace between 3 to 10 seconds. The second energy system, which will be discussed more often in this lecture, is glycolysis, and through the system it breaks CHO into glycogen and glucose that'll be resynthesized through ATP. The last energy system is oxidative, which not only breaks down CHO down, but also fats as well, as both components are seen as substrates. And the oxidative is stated to be named more dominant. As stated in the name, it's actually more dominant for vast amounts of aerobic training. So the energy pathway that will be discussed more often will be glycolysis, in which carbohydrates in the form of glucose being broken down into ATP. The breakdown of glucose during glycolysis can be broken down within 10 different steps. So, as we know, there are 10 specific steps to breaking down glucose molecules, at least one glucose molecule to be converted into energy. So the first step of glucose broken down will be the glucose is phosphorylated by ATP in the form of sugar, phosphates. Sorry. From there, the negative charge that is present actually prevents the passage of sugar through the membrane. Therefore, it traps the glucose within the cell. The next steps allows chemical structure where it becomes rearranged by moving the carbonyl oxygen from carbon 1 to carbon 2. Because of this, it forms the ketose from allulose sugar, according to the study. For steps 3, it allows newly formed hydroxyl groups within carbon 1 to become phosphorylated by ATP as it makes the preparation to form 3 carbon sugar phosphates. This is the more controlled step for glycolysis as the sugar enters in. And step 4 shows that the 6 carbon sugar is now halved into 3 carbon molecule, which is now glycerolide 3-phosphates, which proceeds through the glycolysis. The other product of the step is also known as dihydroxyacetone phosphate, in which is then isomerized to form into glycerolide high 3-phosphate during step 5. So step 6 allows the 2 molecules of the glycerolide 3-phosphate become oxidized. This allows the energy phase for glycolysis to begin. Step 7 then allows the transfer of ADP of energy phosphate that has been established at the previous step, and then it moves on towards step 8, to which the remaining phosphate within 3-phosphoglyceride is then moved from carbon 3 to carbon 2 in order to form 2-phosphoglyceride, for which then removes water from phosphoglyceride, which allows creatine of high energy phosphate. Then this will lead to the final step where the transference towards ADP of the energy phosphate group is able to complete the glycolysis pathway after forming the ATP. Now, this is interesting. The fatty acid through oxidation and metabolism. This occurs a lot more differently than breaking down glucose, especially when it comes to breaking down fats through catabolism as it approaches towards beta oxidation. We know that fatty acids are oxidized through beta oxidation that goes into two carbon acidized DOA molecules. This allows the molecule to be able to enter through the Krebs cycle to be able to generate ATP. Adding to that, according to the textbook, the cycle then degrades acetyl CoA into both hydrogen and carbon dioxide. So if there's any excess acetyl CoA then that has been created in the cycle process, then it basically be used to synthesize ketone bodies that are within the cells. This entirely allows oxygen to be put into energy, especially with fats becoming the primary source after depletion of carbohydrates/glucose within the cells. So looking at the total yield for each pathway, so we do know that for the ATP yield for glycolysis is actually 4 from one single glucose molecule. So the reason why is because when 2 ATP molecules are consumed, it helps produces 4 ATP. Not only that, but also produces 2 NADH as well as 2 pyruvate as a result of the anaerobic respiration. For the glycolysis through aerobic metabolism, however, through the Krebs cycle during aerobic respiration, 5 ATP from oxidative phosphorylation from 2 reduced are pretty much made from 2 reduced NAD during glycolysis, 5 ATP from oxidative phosphorylation that came from acetyl CoA during the Krebs cycle, for which 15 ATP were formed from 6 reduced NAD along with 3 ATP from 2 reduced FAD. Then when you finally have 2 ATP produced as a result, which combine a total of 32 ATP, so which pretty much has like a yield ATP for aerobic metabolism, so which means 32 ATPs are produced from one glucose molecules for aerobic metabolism. So how do pathways interact across exercise? Well, we do know that for ATP PCR, applies about like at least 10 seconds worth of energy used for the short burst of exercise. So if you're doing like a 100 meter sprint, then the ATP within the body that's produced at a higher rate, to be able to keep up within that short burst of exercise when you're doing the sprint. So as for glycolytic energy system, we do know that glycolytic is both aerobic and anaerobic, which produces energy for short bursts, but also like high intensity training that lasts no more than several minutes to exercise. And then when you move on to the aerobic system, which is metabolism, respiration, with oxygen as the main energy source, generally done with less intensity, and can go for long periods of time, such as doing cross country and or distance runs, basically. So when it comes to looking at the primary factors that limit the APT production for each pathway, as we all know that cells actually contain basically a very small amount of ATP, and then when it comes to resynthesizing, can only be resynthesizing during its rate of use. So like for a sedentary person, the resynthesis amount of ATP for each day is only about like at least 75% of the body mass. But for endurance athletes, however, they can actually generate about 20 times the resting energy expenditure, such as like running a marathon, whereas they're actually using 80 kilograms of ATP during that kind of pace. However, under extreme conditions, we all know that ATP actually decreases within skeletal muscles when it comes to like, not producing enough like energy for its pace. Therefore, that by maintaining a small amount, there's going to be like a minimal decrease within the ATP itself. So when looking at the ATP production, we do know that the human body itself only stores around like 80 to 100 grams of ATP at any time, but again, it only depends on whether or not the person is sedentary or the person is actually considered to be very active. So pathway applying to the real world. Obviously, we know that physical activity and exercise play a key role in producing ATP, whether it's intensive, moderate, or low energy. The body is designed to move when it comes to moving the muscle, causing contraction and relaxation that allows skeletal muscles to be put into work. When it comes to clinical There has been significant clinical significance regarding how ATP would actually benefit within the medical field, such as dealing with pain control, where ATP is provided intravenously that would then cause adenosine receptor to initiate a signaling cascade that would aid in its pain-relieving effects, especially towards inflammation. When applying for anesthesia, a low dose of the adenosine reduces pain that are ischemic and neuropathic, which has nearly the same level of effects as morphine. Last but not least, when it comes to surgery, especially with cardiology, ATP can be seen as vasodilator in a safe, effective way for those dealing with hypertension. Therefore, it actually induces hypotension in patients that reduce the risk of strokes as well as heart diseases, especially when it comes to doing surgery. And that is it. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns regarding how ATP is produced within the human body, please leave a comment below. I'd be happy to get back to you guys and provide with the best information I can possibly provide. All right, have a good one. Bye-bye.